you have tried to quit before. Maybe 3 times, maybe 11. Each time, somewhere around day 4 or day 40, the old behavior came back, dragging guilt and a worse mood with it. You called it a willpower problem. Nobody ever handed you the actual mechanism. The method in this video does not ask you to resist anything. It predates the word habit itself, and it was built for survival. In the 8th century, along the rivers and coastlines of Japan, Shinto priests developed a practice called misogi. Before entering a shrine, a person would stand under freezing water, a waterfall or the sea at dawn, and let the cold strip away kegare, the static that ordinary living leaves on a person. This was never punishment. It was a reset, a line drawn between who you were an hour ago and who you're about to become. The practice held for 12 centuries. Then, American endurance athletes borrowed the word without its history, applying it to any brutal annual physical ordeal. They kept the intensity and lost the point. Misogi was about identity, and identity is the actual lever behind every habit you've ever failed to break. Before we go on, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far this story travels. And if you're loving it so far, join the family by hitting subscribe, because tomorrow we've got something special lined up just for you. Marcus learned that the hard way. He's 31, lives in Chicago, and 6 months ago had a job, a fiancée, and a problem he wouldn't name. Marcus worked as a loan underwriter, sharp enough with numbers that he got handed the complicated files. His fiancée, Dana, taught middle school science 2 towns over. On paper, nothing about his life looked broken. His evenings had a pattern. Dinner with Dana, an hour together, normal. Around 9, when she went to read in the other room, he opened his phone. Not social media, a sportsbook app. It started 2 years earlier as background noise to Bears games, $20 here and there. Somewhere in that stretch, the bet stopped being about the game. The game became an excuse for the bet. By the time this story starts, Marcus was watching lines move. A parlay on a Latvian bowling tournament, a same-game prop on a college volleyball match he couldn't name a single player in. The sport didn't matter. What mattered was the 15 seconds between placing the bet and watching the number shift. He told himself he had it handled. He assessed other people's financial risk for a living. Surely he understood his own. The truth showed up in a spreadsheet. Checking a joint savings transfer for the wedding one sleepless night, he found $11,000 less than there should have been. Not stolen. Spent. $300 at a time, over 14 months, spread across enough small withdrawals that he had never added them into one number until that night. He sat on the bathroom floor with his phone in his hand for a long time. Not because the number broke him, because he had built an entire second life running in parallel to the one Dana thought she was marrying into. He told her 3 days later. She didn't yell. She asked one question he couldn't answer. How long has this actually been going on? He said 2 years. She said she needed time apart and moved in with her sister that weekend. Marcus deleted the app that night, with the theatrical resolve of someone who thinks the problem lives in the software. 9 days later, at 11 p.m., alone in an apartment that suddenly felt enormous, he re-downloaded it in under 90 seconds. His thumb had the login saved before his conscious mind finished deciding to do it. The habit was never in the app. It lived in a loop his brain had built, and deleting an icon doesn't touch a loop. Marcus found Kenji Sato through a coworker who mentioned that his uncle does the cold water thing at the lake on Sundays, some kind of Shinto deal. Marcus wasn't the type to chase anything spiritual. He was also 9 days into a life that had gotten smaller than he recognized, and he'd run out of his own ideas. He met Kenji at 6 a.m. on a Sunday in October, on a Lake Michigan beach, empty except for one man in his 60s, standing at the shoreline in swim trunks, unbothered by the cold. Kenji had been born in Osaka, moved to Chicago at 19, trained a decade under a Shinto priest, before life got complicated, and now worked as a physical therapist during the week and led a small group at the lake on weekends. "You're the underwriter," Kenji said, not as a question. "I'm the guy with the gambling problem," Marcus corrected him. Kenji almost smiled. "Everyone corrects me like that, the first time. Tell me what you actually did last night before you came." "I didn't gamble. That's not what I asked." Marcus thought about it. "I sat with the app open for 20 minutes, deciding not to use it. Then I closed it and watched television until I fell asleep." "So you spent 20 minutes fighting yourself and won. How do you feel this morning?" "Tired." "Right. Willpower isn't free. It's a withdrawal from an account you don't get to refill on command. You can win that fight most nights, not forever." Kenji picked up a smooth stone, turned it once in his palm, set it back down. "You're not here because you need more willpower. You're using the wrong tool." "So what's the right one?" "Misogi," Kenji said. "You've probably heard the word used wrong on the internet. Applied to suffering through something hard once a year to feel alive. Misogi is a purification. You go into the water as one version of yourself and come out as another. Not metaphorically. The water removes accumulated kagare, a buildup from ordinary living, and gives you a clean state to act from. I don't see how freezing water fixes a gambling app. It doesn't fix anything. The water isn't the treatment. So it's the line. Right now there's no clear boundary in your head between the man who lost $11,000 and the man standing on this beach. You're the same continuous person, dragging the same story behind you every day, refighting a battle against a version of yourself that already knows how the movie ends. Misogi gives you a hard stop. Once you've stood in that water, you're allowed to be someone who did not do what he did yesterday." Marcus looked at the lake. It looked exactly as cold as it was. "Get in," Kenji said. "Not to punish yourself, to end something." The water was 51 degrees. Marcus walked into his waist, and every part of his body told him this was a mistake his ancestors had specifically evolved to avoid. Kenji stood beside him, unbothered, and told him to breathe out slowly through pursed lips. 4 counts, then hold, then repeat. "Don't think about the app," Kenji said. "Don't think about Dana. Don't think about the money. Think about nothing except the number 4. In, 4, hold, out." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For the first 30 seconds, Marcus's brain refused to cooperate, throwing up the spreadsheet, Dana's face at the door, the specific dollar amount, on a loop. Then, somewhere around the 1-minute mark, something changed. Not comfort. The cold didn't stop hurting. But his thoughts stopped narrating the pain and started simply registering it, the way you register a sound instead of describing it to yourself in words. There was cold, there was breath. There was nothing else competing for space. He was in the water for 4 minutes. When he walked out, wrapped in the towel Kenji handed him, he felt something he hadn't expected. Not relief exactly, more like the specific silence after a very loud room empties out. "That's the line," Kenji said. "Everything before this morning stays in the water. You don't get to use it as an excuse anymore. And you don't get to use it as a weapon against yourself either. It happened. It's done. The man standing here decides what happens next, and he owes nothing to the man who made those bets." Marcus wanted this to be permanent. It wasn't, not from a single morning. Kenji gave him something small before he left. A single instruction that felt almost insultingly modest for the size of the problem it was meant to address. Every night, before you'd normally open that app, you're going to do one thing instead. You're going to run cold water over your hands and forearms in the sink for 30 seconds, and you're going to say one sentence out loud. "This is not who I am tonight, not who I used to be, not who I'll become eventually. Who you are tonight, nothing else." No app, no promises about forever. That's it? 30 seconds of cold water and a sentence? You've spent 2 years trying to out-willpower a habit that fires every single night at the exact same time, Kenji said. You don't need a bigger weapon. You need a smaller, cleaner line, drawn in the same place, every single night, until your brain stops treating 9 o'clock as a decision and starts treating it as an established fact. Here's where the ritual and the research land in the same place, even though nobody who built either one was talking to the other. Neuroscientist Anne Graybiel's lab at MIT has spent decades studying how the basal ganglia encode routine behavior, using rats running a T-shaped maze as the model. Once a behavior becomes automatic, the brain compresses it, firing intensely only at the start, and the reward, going quiet in between. A habit, once formed, doesn't require thought. It runs like a subroutine. This is why "just don't do it" fails so reliably against an established loop. You're issuing a command to a part of the brain that isn't designed to receive commands in real time. By the time Marcus's thumb reached for the app, the decision had effectively already been made somewhere below conscious awareness. The piece almost nobody talks about is what breaks a loop's grip without demanding a fight. Researchers who study behavior change describe something called a discriminative stimulus, a cue so distinct from your ordinary environment that your brain can't process it through the automatic pathway at all. Cold water on skin is one of the more reliable ones we know of. It triggers the mammalian dive reflex, drops heart rate, and forces a burst of attention that overrides whatever routine was about to fire. It's not willpower. It's closer to a circuit breaker. What Kenji had built into his ritual, likely without ever reading a neuroscience journal, was a nightly discriminative stimulus paired with a short, repeatable identity statement. The cold water interrupted the automatic pathway. The sentence gave Marcus's brain something to encode in its place. Say the same sentence enough nights in a row, at the same cue point, and you're not fighting the loop anymore. You're replacing the entire loop with a different one, cue for cue. There's a study, referenced constantly and understood by almost nobody who cites it, by researcher Philippa Lally at University College London. It tracked 96 people forming new routines and found that true automaticity took, on average, 66 days, not the 21 everyone quotes. But the detail that matters more than the number is this: missing a single day here or there barely moved the outcome. What mattered was whether the person returned to the cue the next time it appeared. Consistency of return beat perfection by a wide margin. Marcus missed 4 nights out of his first 60. Twice from exhaustion, once from a work trip where he simply forgot, once on a particularly bad night 3 weeks in, because he gave in and placed 2 small bets before catching himself and stopping. Each time, he ran the water the next night and said the sentence anyway, not as penance. Just as the next instance of the same line being drawn. 4 months later, Marcus met Kenji at the lake again, this time in December, the water somewhere in the high 30s. He went in anyway. "You look different," Kenji said afterward. "I got my 30-day chip from a Gamblers Anonymous meeting last week," Marcus said. "First time in 2 years I've gone 30 days without placing a single bet. And the sync ritual? Still doing it. Some nights it feels unnecessary now. I do it anyway. That's the part people skip," Kenji said. "They stop the moment it feels unnecessary, which is exactly the moment it's finally working." Dana had come back, cautiously, on the condition that Marcus stay in counseling and that all his accounts be visible to her. He agreed, without negotiating, which surprised her more than the agreement itself. The wedding, postponed once, was back on the calendar. The urge hadn't disappeared. Kenji had never promised that it would. On a bad night in early winter, after a call from his mother about a health scare, Marcus felt the old pull with a force that startled him. That specific compression in the chest, the app practically visible on the home screen of his mind. He ran the water. Cold, over his hands, 30 seconds. he said the sentence. This is not who I am tonight. The urge didn't vanish, but there was a gap now, a half-second of distance between the feeling and whatever he did next, and inside that half-second, for the first time in longer than he could remember, there was a choice instead of a foregone conclusion. That gap is the entire method, not the elimination of desire, the construction of a small, cold, repeatable line that your nervous system eventually learns to trust more than the habit it's replacing. 3 things before you go. First, the fight you keep losing was never a fair one. Willpower is a limited resource pulled from the same tank every single time you use it, and a nightly habit will always outlast your reserves eventually. You don't need a bigger tank. You need to stop drawing from it every night at 9. Second, the ritual matters less than the consistency of the line. Cold water works because it's sudden and distinct enough to interrupt an automatic pathway. But the deeper mechanism is repetition at the same cue, night after night, missed days included, until your brain stops treating the moment as a decision at all. Third, relapse doesn't erase the progress. It just means you draw the line again the next night. Marcus missed 4 nights out of his first 60 and still got to the other side. The point was never a perfect streak. The point was whether he came back to the water. Marcus still has bad nights. He still runs the water. He got married in June. If you've made it this far in the video, you've already shown you can sit with a hard idea to the end, instead of scrolling away from it, which is its own kind of proof that you're capable of more than you've been giving yourself credit for. If this helped, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path. That's our story. If you enjoyed it, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. And tomorrow, more stories are waiting for you. Thanks for watching.